Hello, I'm Brandy Agerbeck of LooseTooth.com, and I help you reclaim drawing as your best thinking tool so you can see and shape your life and your work in new ways. And today I have got 3 love letters for teachers. I want to talk about what different teachers have meant to me as a belated video of last week's Teachers Appreciation Week. So last week we celebrated Teacher Appreciation Day and week, and with that I had a giveaway of 10 books and 1 grand prize of the Agerbeck method, and very happy to report that of those 11 winners, where I was sharing what I teach with these teachers so they could see and shape their work in new ways and help their learners see and shape their work in new ways too. So happily, out of those 11 winners, I had folks from Argentina, Belgium, Canada, Germany, France, Netherlands, Poland, and the US of A. So I've got some good international shipping ahead today. So I want to talk about teachers and teaching, and a little bit of backstory. And in this video, you might have heard a couple of these stories before, but I think they're still important because teaching is so important. So I was about 13 years old-ish, and I was at my grandparents' cabin in Wisconsin. For those of you who've seen that, I have this particular photo of myself drawing really intensely. This takes place at that same cabin. And we were around the dinner table, and we got on the topic of what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said I wanted to be a teacher. My grandpa Carl, who is a specifications writer, military man, army man, specifications writer, he just shot back, "What are you, a masochist?" And I think I knew what the word masochist meant at the time, but I knew it wasn't good in the context, in the way he was saying it. It was sort of this feeling of like, it really stung. Like, it was really this like, oh, am I? Why is this bad? I don't understand. And as much as that stung at the time, for me personally, I was really glad he said that, because it simply shook me loose of this feeling that that was the thing I had to be, which in my particular case was useful, and I'll say more about that later. But yeah, so that was kind of the initial kind of, I wanted to identify in this role, and then somebody I respected said, "What are you, a masochist?" And yeah, so throughout my life, I've been extremely lucky to have fantastic teachers. As folks know, I did not win the parental lottery, but thankfully I had really good experiences at school, and was really thankful to fall into the right college for me, being a first-generation college student. And so really lucky for all those things. And as I'll mention, one of the biggest learning environments I grew up in was volunteering at my hometown's nature center. And I'll give a shout out to the gentleman there who was such a big influence. So just want to share 3 things that when I looked at what were the 3 factors that had such a huge impact in my ability to learn and my ability to stay open and curious and to very much become a lifelong learner. These are the 3 things I really feel were pivotal to that. So the first one, love letter number 1, is leeway. Now leeway, it's sort of flexibility or adaptability if this is not an English word you're familiar with. So the idea is you give somebody leeway, you let them have some wiggle room, you give them some space to do what they need to do. And truly, I was incredibly lucky that I did have teachers all around me, and I did pick a college where I had a lot of leeway. I had a lot of independence. And I think when I've shared stories with folks, this has been absolutely huge to people who are very smart, very creative, who felt super boxed in and stifled in their education experience, their educational life, because they weren't given leeway. Here's the deal. I was incredibly lucky that I had teachers who gave me space to work in the way I worked best. So basically that meant they would give me an assignment, and usually it was very verbal, it was written, it was very much sort of old school way of working. I'm 45, so I graduated high school in 92 and college in 96. Gives you a little bit of context of time. And believe me, I'm sure classrooms feel extremely different with standardized testing Very different environment, a lot of group work. I was working with a Grinnell student in sort of a spring break externship. She came and job shadowed for 3 days, and she told me how much group work there is, and I was just mortified, horrified, disturbed. I know it's important. Those social skills and ability to work in groups is important, but boy howdy, I would have absolutely hated that growing up. That's an aside. So I know the environment might be different these days. There's different constraints. Totally understand that. But in my case, I was extremely lucky that a teacher would give me an assignment and then I was able to turn it or twist it or make it into something that challenged me, that was interesting to me, that worked for me, which for the most part really came down to making it a hands-on project. My friend Larissa says she can learn anything if she can turn it into a craft project. And I'm like, yes, that is so true. So that was the thing, was I was really lucky that instead of getting a teacher who's like, what is this? Why are you handing in this diorama when I asked you to do whatever? I was given that space. I was given that leeway. And that's not a given. I think that's one of the biggest things is lots of people, I don't know how much of that was the teacher and how much of it was me, because I know one thing was I was willing to advocate. I didn't even, of course I didn't think of it as advocating for myself when I was 9, but whatever, I was ballsy enough or whatever, strong enough sense of self to at least say, hey, I want to do this. And I was lucky that the teachers on the other side said, okay, all right. Now, I think the two biggest reasons I was able to do that, we were able to, make that happen, was one, very often I was making more work for myself. It wasn't as if I was trying to get out of the assignment. So I was definitely still doing what needed to be done. I was just solving it in a very different way. And two, I wasn't disruptive. So believe me, oh my gosh, the mad respect that, for anyone who has to manage a classroom, special, like I do it like a day at a time in a workshop, right? But the folks, and I'm working with adults, but those who have to sort of read the room and balance what's happening in their classroom, in their space all day, day after day, week after week. Bless you. But that was a big factor, was I wasn't a disruptive kid. So, I'm sure that made it easier. But the leeway that they gave me was absolutely crucial. Because again, it gave me this space. And I don't know exactly what the circumstances were, but there was all these times where, again, I was an independent kid. I wasn't a problem, but I had all these weird projects where they're basically like, Brandy, go to the back of the room and work on your own project. I'm like, okay, great. But that was important that I was given that space. Now, of course, the flip side of that is when you do have people who are so the letter of the law that you're like, okay, I asked you to do X, you must do X. You can't make X look like Y or Z, right? And again, I know, especially with things like standardized testing, the constraints in the classrooms are very different. Completely understand. But I have to say, leeway, first way that teachers across the board gave me space to be able to work in the way I work. So instead of, being squished by the educational system, it was a space where I could actually keep doing what I do and somehow remarkably end up doing this, teaching visual thinking. Who knew? I always say, especially the graphic facilitation work I've done for the past 20 plus years, no college or no high school graduate, what am I trying to say? No high school guidance counselor could say, this is what you're going to be when you grow up, right? Whatever. Didn't know that it even existed till I fell into it 22 years ago. So that was the first one. First love letter is all of those teachers who gave me leeway, gave me the space, and was like, okay, you know what? I asked for X, but she can give me X plus whatever, or she can make X into a diorama, or whatever. Very, very thankful for those experiences. So the second love letter, so specifically I'm going to tell you a story about Mr. George. Mr. George was my high school biology teacher. So I went off to college, not only still at that time believing I was going to become a teacher, I also believed I was going to be a biology teacher. I love the subject. Mr. George was a super awesome role model. So one Monday morning, he comes into class and he's just like ragged. And this is, high school, I think it was 10th grade biology class. So I was, 10th grade, I was 13, 14, 15-ish, 15-ish, around there. Anyway, so 10th grade biology class, Monday morning, Mr. George comes in and he's like, oh, you cannot believe the weekend I had. And we're all looking at him like, what? He goes, oh, yeah. Yeah, so I live downtown. So I grew up north of the Twin Cities. He's like, lives in Minneapolis. And he's like, I live downtown. I live in a high rise, right? And I got this little side project. I've been doing it in not here because, whatever, it's not, don't want to use the school's resources, but I have back home in my, at home lab, I created a clone of myself. And he's great. He actually, would come and teach for me. But the problem is he was always swearing. And it's like, God, I was just, this would happen where I'd say, Steve and George, Steve, hey Steve, you got to stop, Steve clone, stop swearing in front of the kids. You're a terrible influence. And of course, he would just respond to me with more swearing. And this weekend, it just came to a head. Like, we could not get past this. And we got into this fist fight, and I ended up pushing him off my balcony. And the police came, and they tried to arrest me. And I said, well, you can't arrest me for murder because he's my clone. I made him. So they ended up arresting me for an obscene clone fall. I just barely got through that joke. So, love letter number 2. One of the things that my very favorite and most effective teachers have had in common was humor. So, truly, this happened in 10th grade biology class. Mr. George came in, he told the story as if it's exactly what happened, and all of us were like just wrapped with attention of like, what? And that, that's how we rolled. And absolutely fantastic teacher too, but he was able to bring so much levity and humor and joy into the classroom. And, one thing I want to say is like, it's not that he didn't take his job seriously. It wasn't that, it was a space where you could get away with stuff. Like, if you were messing around, he was going to call you, pull you back into place. So it wasn't as if it was like this free for all, because I think a lot of times, education is serious. Humor is not serious and ridiculous. And so there's like this huge division. But it's like so much humor that he brought into really learning biology was absolutely fantastic. So, so incredibly thankful that, we can do this work. It's hard work. It's challenging work. It's, some of it's kind of boring work for sure in school and, but if you can do it with some humor, it goes so darn far. So hooray. Hooray for humor in general. Hooray to Mr. George, and rest in peace, his clone. So, all right. So love letter number 3. Ta-da! So this love letter is super favorite of mine. Oh boy, is teachers who create a space that's challenging, that challenge you. And I really want to make clear that a challenging environment is not about being confrontational. You can create a space that is challenging in the absolute best way, that's not combative. Believe me, that was my experience with my dad. That was my experience with my main printmaking professor in college. Like, there's bad challenging where everything is a freaking struggle, and there's good challenging where somebody sees in you your potential and wants to help you step up your game. The best, right? And, this is something so I mentioned the nature center that I volunteered at. So this was middle school through high school. And other story there, but basically, longer story there, but basically every Sunday evening I would go to this nature center and volunteer. And Scott Ramsey is the name, he's not there at that particular nature center, but Scott Ramsey, naturalist, worked at teaching and building stuff at this nature center. Absolutely fantastic human being. Thank you, Scott Ramsey, for being a huge reason I turned out as well as I did. Thank you. And Scott was great at just like coming up with projects and challenges, and not in a confrontational way, not in a combative way. It's just sort of like truly, this is a story I tell in the Agerbeck method for a particular listening exercise. But truly, one day he's like, Brandy, I've got a project for you. And of course he's saying it in that like, hey, like this conspiratorial. So like, hey, I got something for you. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And he goes, I need you to assemble this deer skeleton. I'm like, what? 7th grade, I'm 12? No, 13? Again, whatever age, ish, about around there. And it turns out that so this, grew up in a suburb. 2 different deer had been killed by cars at the time that, lived in the park, went out into traffic, etc. So he now had these 2 deer carcasses. So the project he gave me was we were going to skin these 2 deer, singular, 2 deer, and 1 deer skin we were going to tan in the sort of Native American way, which was using their brain. Like you actually boil the brain of the animal to tan the skin of the animal, the hide of the animal. And the other one was sort of the cowboy Western way of using alum and these different chemicals. And then I was going to have this whole project putting together this deer skeleton. Of course I was. It was just, again, this is one of those cases of somebody who gave me a challenge in a really great way where it was about curiosity, it was about openness, it was about creativity, it was about problem solving. It was like, hey, I know you can do this, Brandy Agerbeck, and sure enough I did when I was in frickin' 7th grade. So, it took weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was a whole big project, but, very much a case where this was somebody in my life who helped me learn because they gave me a challenge. Another one, and it was very much about a safe space to figure things out. That's the biggest thing is, I talk about, I teach a 3-day, very intensive workshop called The Lab. And I always say it's a safe but challenging environment. That's exactly what I want to create, which is we're going to be challenged. You do not kick back and, put up your feet during those 3 days. It is definitely challenging, but it's also a safe space, meaning you can mess up. You can do things that feel weird. You can feel emotional because, it's vulnerable and awkward and frustrating. And you can get silly and be joyful because you've met these challenges and you've rocked and rolled. Like, it's the friggin' best, right? So, again, this is not about challenging in the way that I'm trying to set anyone up for failure. That is absolutely not the scenario at all. It's challenging in, we're going to push ourselves, but you have chosen to be here because you want to challenge yourself. You want to push yourself. Let's rock and roll. So one of the absolute key, so Jeremy is the name of my partner, and we are getting married in 5 months, so I'm in wedding planning mode, but an absolutely pivotal moment in our very first date 5-ish years ago was he told a story about a band director who challenged him. And, I could kind of, I'm good at reading people, but it's like I'm getting from our conversation up to the point in the first date was, oh, this is a really smart dude who hasn't really been challenged. He hasn't really found like his thing, right? But he told this story about this band director who knew he had and Jeremy would, he played trumpet, but he was like, I never want to be first chair. It was that kind of thing of like, who needs that? So he would always kind of under audition to not be first chair. And thankfully this new band director came in, so totally saw through that crap and said, look, you have talent, you have skill, and challenged him to participate more and join the musical and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure I'm saying way more words than he did, but there was just this sound in his voice when he was telling this story. I'm like, oh, you needed that. Like that was a really huge experience for him, that teacher saw in him that potential, that ability. And instead of saying like, all right, let's let it slide, he's like, no, called him out and said, step it up, boy. So, that's definitely, that really lovely, challenging. Yeah, I'm repeating myself now, but you get the point. It's like somebody who's willing to see in you what you can do and calls you on it in the best, most healthy way. And so just wanted to share these 3 kind of points about what is meant the most for me personally in the teachers I've had in my life. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, oh, like it's one of those things where, yes, I know I'm a teacher, but the thing is, because of that really, stingy kind of pivotal experience as a teenager with my grandpa Carl, I don't, I did not get an education degree. I am not credentialed as an educator. I work extremely hard at being a teacher, and I'm very proud of my ability to teach. Like, it's always been kind of like, that's my thing, right? I got a heart of a teacher. It's just in there. And, but, I also appreciate that there's very formal structures around education. So that's like the kind of thing of like, well, I teach, but am I a teacher? And for me, so I want to get back to this point about Grandpa Carl. So Grandpa Carl said, what are you, a masochist? And I fully admit, I mentioned several points in this video so far about being really independent. I fully admit that I am really thankful I didn't go that traditional formal route. For me personally, the sort of gatekeeping of education, the places where education is really rigid, just personally for me would have been a really rough road. And all of those of you who persevere and take that path, I absolutely respect it. Do not get me wrong. It just wasn't the path for me. So, just the fact that through books, through online courses, through these workshops, I'm able to teach and, connect with these teachers and all sorts of learners all over the world is, incredibly, incredibly gratifying. So, that's my love letter. I hope that I bring those things out in my, I was reflecting on these three things of, giving people space, giving them leeway, being flexible, not being like, this is the one way to do this thing. No, I'm going to show you what I know, and I'm going to give you the space to develop what works for you. That's my interpretation of how I use leeway in my work. For sure, I try to add some humor, and then definitely, like I said, it's about creating creating challenges that are challenging in the best possible way, that really help people step up and take their work, take themselves, take whatever it is to a higher level than they started. So certainly, I hope that I embody that in my work, and it's definitely been the role models and experiences I've had in my life so far. So those are my love letters to teachers in my past. I would absolutely love for you to comment below about, maybe take a little time to reflect, or if something just came up immediately upon watching this video, what were the things that meant the most to you with the teachers in your life? And again, it doesn't have to be a classroom teacher. We've got teachers that come from all sorts of different directions in our life and enter our lives in different ways. So I would love to hear from you, what kind of what qualities of a teacher, have meant the most to you? What was the way that got through to you and really helped you learn? And I think I'm preaching to the choir here. Like, I don't think I'm alone here in being a lifelong learner. What were the things that helped you be a lifelong learner, that helped you stay curious, that helped you stay open? And I know plenty of you are watching this going, well, that wasn't my experience. And that's the thing. It's like, even if that wasn't your experience, maybe you just, the particular school you were in, the particular, place you lived, the particular teachers that were in front of you in the classroom, maybe they weren't the right teachers for you. That happens, right? The point is, you have every ability to teach yourself, to put yourself in the right environments now. So for those of you who are like, great for Brandy, but these are things that are changeable. These are things that, you can reflect on. Yes, those might not have been the best experiences in the past, but what can I learn from those that I want to take forward into the future? So again, this is not to bright-side it, or not to say people haven't had difficult experiences. This is definitely the appreciation video. So I want to just open it up if you had comments and observations about, again, what you've appreciated about the teachers in your life. I would absolutely love to read those comments. So I know this is a little bit longer video, but I think teaching and teachers are worth it. Much, 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 much love. And, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all your time and attention anytime I press play, and share a video with you. So thank you so much for watching, and wherever you are, be well and enjoy the next thing you learn or the next thing you teach.